Hi there. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land that is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Treaty 20, adjacent to the Haudenosaunee territory and in the territory covered by the Williams Treaty. I say miigwech to all the people who have come before me and have taken care of these sacred lands and waters, and to those who know it's everyone's responsibility now. We are all treaty people. Today, for our Enwayaang talk, we have Jill Stavely with us. Um, Jill is a musician, a mother, and radio nerd, self-described. She is a Trent grad who moved to Peterborough in 1999. And since moving here, she's been an active member of the local art scene as a technician, administrator, and community member. She is an artist, a workshop leader, radio producer, teacher, open mic host, and audience member. Jill is passionate about many things, and they all center around building a healthy community around her and her family. And we're really grateful to have you here with us today, Jill, for Enwayaang. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm not quite sure how these go. Is this my turn right now?
Well, it's a casual talk. We
Okay.
come together now. Enwayaang, it means how we speak together. It translates
Right.
to that. So we're really grateful to have you come and speak with us today about what you're passionate about. And it's there's no set timing on how long the talk goes or anything. And we open it up at the end for Q&A.
Great.
And yeah,
Wonderful.
I'll
Yeah,
give
we
you.
usually have 20-ish, 20 to 30 probably, Jill, and then we let folks ask some questions. But yeah, what we love about this series is your passion about stuff launches our passion about stuff, and then we can speak together as our name implies, as Stephanie said.
That's great. I'm so used to encouraging other people to raise their voices. I spend a lot of time recording other people. I spend a lot of time asking questions, and I feel like that's when I was reading what Steph had written. Like social justice and experiential education within in the arts in the classroom and stuff. The work that I think is so important. If you go to write a resume or you go to write down what's important to you, it's hard to come up with that list. But I feel that the more I think about my life, everything I do is about asking questions, about trying to learn things, and about trying to create a space that feels right for my heart. And as a mom, for me, I used to be a musician, and then 11 years ago, I became a mom, and that became the top of my performance as a human being, and everything has been driven by what kind of community do I want to raise my children in, and when you're an adult hanging out with adults, and I hung out with a lot of adults. I was playing in bands and touring and a lot of time in bars and working in nightclubs and stuff. My whole life was very adult focused. You don't really think about growth, and that how kids and adults are just the same, and that you cannot create a community of people by focusing on the adults and the things that we're doing. You create a community of people by working with children as they grow. So instead of trying to change the adults around you, you spend this time figuring out. I think back to high school for me, and the things that were normalized at that time, the things that I have since learned, maybe were problematic, or I've had my eyes opened, or people have questioned the way that we as a society and a community think about people and places, and the conversations we didn't have. I specifically think about residential schools, and it was something that I knew nothing about when I was a kid. And like learning later in life that I had some neighbors who were part of the 60s scoop, that they were kids who were, growing up, adopted into a family. I never considered their origins. It wasn't even talked about. And instead of trying to create a society where, as adults, we talk about these things and try and make good decisions and let kids be kids, I want to create a space where I can normalize having these conversations with my kids, to let them know what I didn't know as a child, but also to let these things be normal for them. So it's not part of a coming of age. So it's not part of something that when you're an adult, you get to have tough conversations. Like, it's okay to have tough conversations as a kid. And I think for me, these are these ideas of social justice in the classroom. I have been privileged to take part in Teach Outside the Box as a steering committee member. And Teach Outside the Box is an alternative placement with a focus on social justice and education through the Kawartha World Issues Center. Is for teachers in our community, and specifically part of the 4-credit work that education students can do at Trent. And someone asked me one day, is like, come be part of this for the work you do with rock camp for girls in Peterborough. And I had no idea. Like, I didn't know that what I was doing was different. I didn't know that what I was doing was maybe special, that I was part of something, that having the opportunity to have kids tell me that my ideas needed to change, or have community members hold us accountable to talk about change, to start circles where we share our gender pronouns. So it's not someone who needs to be different or to stand out, that we normalize these things. And you get to learn from these kids that we're having a hard time having these conversations, and they feel awkward. And I attended Zoom sessions recently where we were all asked to do land acknowledgements, and you kind of stumble and you feel weird. In that, like, it's joyful to be awkward and to do these things, so that we make this moment of change, so that we feel uncomfortable, so that these things don't have to feel uncomfortable later. I don't know if I am a rambler. This will be an exceptional talk. I will just keep going until you stop me, probably, as anybody who's ever met me knows. But I think these things are important, and I think that I face them every day with my kids, trying to figure out how to be accountable to our community, recognizing that I have the joy of living in this little bubble we mostly call Trent Radio, this really weird community radio station. We don't even call ourselves a radio station. We're a broadcast facility. And when we meet with other campus and community radio stations across the country, we were just at the National Campus and Community Radio Association's conference. We're very similar. In so many ways, we're very similar to so many other campus and community radio stations. But one thing that's different is that the people who built Trent Radio created a space where we choose to embrace failure. We want people to take risks. We want people to feel uncomfortable. We want to really embrace and acknowledge and understand freedom of expression, and do it in a very, very, very respectful way. And to create this space where my role right now as the director of programming at Trent Radio, where it's my job to make sure that we're meeting our CRTC requirements for our content categories, our Canadian content, our spoken word, all that kind of stuff. But my job is literally not to care if anyone's listening. Like, isn't that weird? This space that was created by these Trent students who were able to take their content to the local radio station, and somebody told them, you can't do that on the radio. People don't want to hear that. Decided that they wanted to create a space where the content they were creating was actually about these producers with as few limitations as possible. And I get to go to work at Trent Radio every day. So sometimes I forget that this place that's normalized for me, this place that I get to bring my kids to, they have their own radio show, they do Smooth Operator, they come to work, they know everybody there, everybody knows them, that we're really lucky to be part of this space that's normal. And then when I go to the classroom, we have a wonderful school community, and it is an exceptional group of people. My kids are doing online school right now, but when we're meeting people in person, we go to Queen Mary Public School, and it's an exceptional community of people. But there are still things that there's not enough space to challenge comfortably, because there's so much time to get through the day. And so trying to find ways to have these conversations about, maybe let's not call every class boys and girls, right? Maybe let's not make assumptions about wealth. Maybe let's, talk about how we can be inclusive rather than exclusive. Thinking about creating a space where someone can tell us about their perspective, because there's no way that I can imagine. I look at this wonderful Zoom collection of people here. There's no way that I can understand what your perspective is unless I ask you, unless there's an opportunity for us to engage in a conversation. which is like what you do with these, which is what's happening in these moments. The more we can listen to other people, and the more we can take these time and spaces to think about what these challenges might be. That was a lot of what I learned being part of this wonderful group at Teach Outside the Box, thinking about like, things seem normal and great for me, and it's normal to sit in the Trent Radio kitchen and someone say, well, I totally disagree with you. Let's talk about this, right? We don't have that everywhere. And recognizing that even that's a perspective that I come to the table with. How do you start these conversations? How do you ask people what their perspective is? How do you foster space for art in the classroom when not everybody has access to understand what it is? How do you break down those barriers of, so many teachers who, and I shouldn't just say teachers, human beings, like we were all taught that if you're going to sing, you have to sound good. Like, who gave us that idea? Because like singing feels good. And unfortunately, other people have to listen to you. So it's nice when you can sound good. But like, if you're singing to sound good, then you're singing for other people. And that's entirely missing the point of art for health and for self and for community. And there's these moments, I don't know if any of you have sung in a choir, but when you sing in a choir and you like close your eyes or you just feel it, there's something happens. Everybody's vibrating in the same moment, in the same time. And there's this connection without touching, of just being. And if you've had that opportunity to sing joyfully, I look at Elizabeth McDonald, who's here today, and she reminds me of the church that I grew up going to in Kingston. And I think about how, church is this significant place. And for me, it was much less about the religion and much more about the community, much more about that space where we're holding people and people are checking in. I learned to make eye contact. I learned to ask about people. I learned to be just nosy enough to know what was happening in other people's houses so you could take care of each other, but to do so in a really respectful way, to watch people and to think and to take time. How often in our lives do we get to just sit and be part of something actively and take a moment to contemplate and know that someone actually cares what you think about it. And you're not there because you paid to be there. You're not there because you're getting graded on it. You're being there and you're taking part in it because that's what community is. Yeah. I feel like Melanie, you were going to say something maybe?
Well, I was like, you gave a natural pause there, and I was like, I think Jill really wants to interact with us, so I'm just going to take my mic off now. She wants it. I can feel it. You blew me away thinking about singing. Actually, I was still thinking about your singing point, because I often think, oh, I'm not a very good singer, but I love singing, and I did sing in choirs growing up. But you blew my mind there, like, oh yeah, singing is actually also for me, and it doesn't matter. Like, so I sing in the car, in the shower, but like I shouldn't even say that. I sing around my family all the time, and I don't care if they like it. So maybe I'm living it. But yeah, you blew my mind there, thinking singing's actually not for the other people all the time.
Yeah. But these are these social constructs. These are the things that we can change for our kids. We can normalize these different things.
Yeah.
No?
I think, and also an important thing, something that we talked about last week, was how you have different emotions and a conductor can bring different emotions out of an orchestra. And this kind of ties into it in the fact that if the singers in the orchestra is having fun and they're having enough emotion, it's going to be enjoyable for the viewers, right?
Absolutely.
So that's something to focus on if you're performing as well.
Yeah. And I think that really resonates. I like thinking about rock camp. So if you're not familiar with rock camp for girls, many years ago, Jean Gregg came to a bunch of us and said, let's do a rock camp in Peterborough. So it's, a bunch of kids who come together, focused on girls when we started, as this way to create space for people who don't normally have a chance to rock it on stage, right? So it's like there were not a lot of women, there's not a lot of girls in rock and roll at the time. So it's back, I think in 2006 we started, maybe, or earlier. And it was always about this idea of like not not about the show at the end. The big gig is always like the big deal, but it's the process of getting there, right? And like you find such joy, and it's not just the parents, it's like everybody who was invested. We'd all be like in tears, and I didn't like to admit it because I was like, this is a rock and roll, you know, whatever. But you watch these people who have survived a week of, you know, from start to finish. They learn an instrument. Some people have never picked one up before. They learn in 4 days how to play enough chords or enough beats to play their instrument. They write a song together, which is very difficult. And we explain to them that it's very difficult to write a song with like 4 other teenagers. And then they present it. And it's not actually, sometimes the songs are fantastic, but sometimes they're actually like have been extremely painful to listen to, right? Because it's people who are taking a risk and who are doing these things, and maybe they forgot to tune their guitar or maybe forgot something, but they're like a deer in the headlights, so they're just going to go. But at the end, there's this release, and there is this common, like totally like everybody in the room feels connected and proud and energized, and like music transcends the notes, right? Like this is this idea that it's an accomplishment, you know, to move forward in these ways, and the ability to teach these kids to take risks was brilliant. Like this opportunity that is not about like there's no front singers in the bands. You know, we don't focus on those types of things. We focus on team building. We call it the rock and roll wilderness. It's like survival. And I think creating these spaces is really important. We were recording. I don't know if you're familiar with the RPM challenge. It's an international challenge to write and record an album in the shortest, darkest month of the year. So it happens during February. And I decided to do it with the students at Queen Mary one year. So I went to a bunch of different classes, and we wrote a bunch of different songs, and we turned the stage in the gymnasium, or I guess in the auditorium, into a recording studio, and we recorded all the songs. And there were some moments where teachers were trying to put the best students closest to the microphones, and I refused it. I was like, let everybody just be loud. Let everybody be heard. You know, it's like about this experience. And if you shut someone down, even at one moment in one recording situation, that's what they're going to remember for the rest of their life. But if you play someone's song on the radio that they wrote, that they did, that they performed, and they can hear their voice, that's what they're going to remember and take with them for the rest of their lives. Like it's such a simple moment in allowing us to maybe stop caring what other people think and maybe start caring about how we can lift each other up in really simple ways.
I have a question about that, Jill, in relation to age and wisdom, because I was reading something this week about, oh, Jen Arden, now that I'm 50, I really have been holding on to too much, but now I have this let it go, be yourself. And I thought, like, do we really have to keep saying you have to be 50 to get there? And then when you were talking about kids, I thought, that's what I want. I mean, that's what I want my kids to have. You don't need to be 50 to be able to go, no, I have some security. Now, granted, when you're young, you have an identity crisis, I think, to work your way through that comes with development and with age. I get that. But why do we still have this, I have become wise now that I'm middle-aged and I wasn't wise before? Like, can we not get kids to a point of at least maybe, and I think this is what you're doing in your work, to get kids to a feeling of I'm worthy as my own person, singing it loud and proud. I don't have to have the wisdom of being 50. Or is that just a stumbling block that you have to get older? I know that's kind of a muddled question, but
well, I think both. And I mean, it's just my opinion. Like, what do I know? I'm just like a 42-year-old mom who's like trying to make it in Peterborough, you know? But I think that, you know, you can celebrate Jan Arden finally feeling like she's able to let go of some of these like social constructs at 50 because she's living in a different generation. But hopefully we can take that and, you know, celebrate the milestone while simultaneously like telling our kids, like, look at how awful that was. It took me 50 years to figure it out. You know, here's some things. And definitely experiential learning is also really important. People have to have these experiences for themselves. But I think being honest with kids, I think I look at my kids. I have, you know, Charlie, and she's 11, and Mara is 8. They're phenomenal. And I don't think they're just phenomenal kids because I think they are. Like, I think they're really spectacular and strong human beings. They're pretty wise. They call it as they see it. And I think part of that is that I've always spoken to them like an adult. Like, I've always told them what's going on. They have seen me break down. They have seen me have panic attacks. They have seen me rise up again. They have seen me talk about how am I going to survive the day. You know, I'll ask Charlie in the morning, like, how do I look? And she says, well, Mom, how do you feel? Right. And it's like, I feel like these gifts that by allowing my kids to see the parts of me that have been really hard, you know, to accept or to survive or to come through as a human being, it gives them kind of a warning that, like, you know, yeah, okay, we get to watch TV and we can eat candy and we can do those things that kids do, but here's all this other real work that we can kind of prepare for. Here's what we can understand as growing up, right? If you know what lays ahead, if you have a roadmap, if you've been given directions, if you're told make sure to get gas at this stop because you've got 500 miles before the next gas station, like that's a great opportunity. And if I can tell my kids that because I broke down halfway between, you know, point A and point B, instead of hiding that from them or letting them deal with it when they get there, I think these are the ways, right? It's like, I think that just like Jan Arden, like, I really have to celebrate being 42. I'm very proud of who I am as a person. And it's not always been a joyful adventure, you know, like it has been tricky. Um, and like, I don't think that kids need to have some big coming of age to get to this point. I think we can share with them truthfully, you know, this has been my experience, and then let them have their own.
So,
There's a big long answer for your big long question.
Jill, I have a question, and I know I'm a newcomer to your circle. I'm in Kingston. I'm not connected to Trent. I don't really know a lot about your. I want to learn more about Gzowski College. I do know Jill a little bit, and I had two questions from what you said. And I just so, given that you don't know me, you may tell from my hair I'm a little bit older than you folks. I'm also asking this question as a feminist and as a lesbian. As a parent, we live in really polarized times. And so my first question is to you as a parent, because there are a lot of parents who want to put what, from my perspective, look like limits and controls about what their children are exposed to at school. So particularly around sexual orientations, gender identities, there is this real struggle going on about what's appropriate for children. So that's the question for you as a mom. And for you as a broadcaster, I think this is related. The whole issue of freedom of expression. There are folks that some would say are homophobic, are racist. We could have other words to describe what they're saying, but they're claiming that they should be able to speak on the basis of freedom of expression. So either or both of those, I would love to hear you speak to those.
Sure.
Questions. Thank you.
I mean, I love that, because those are really difficult questions, you know, to talk about, because I know that I get to live in this world where I think subterfuge is a word, you know, comes into play with like my kids' education, when, you know, I might see what happens in the classroom, but my kids also get an entirely paralleled separate education at home. So that's my very personal experience. I am aware of and learning how to maybe fight against the limitations and the social constructs that really come into play in our kids' education. And I do think that we're lucky in a place like Peterborough, where we have the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, who they do a lot of work in classrooms, and they go out, and we actually, even on Trent Radio, have a show called Inspire Intimacy, which is hosted by Alicia Fisher, who is a relationship coach. And she talks about so many really important things about intimacy, about relationships, about sexuality. And she's the person who goes in to speak to those awkward grade 7 and 8s about everything. And she does it with her purple hair and with her confidence. And I know that these kids are getting the real deal. Like, I know that that work is being done in Peterborough, at least. I don't know if it's in every school. I know that there are parents who are not comfortable with the way that some people talk about sex education specifically. And so I guess I hear your question, and I hear your sentiment, and I think that these are things that we have to, in our homes and in our communities, keep trying to normalize what we believe in our hearts to be true and right. And I feel very much that my perspective has and always will be that, you know, everybody is a human being, no matter who they love, no matter who they don't love. You know, it's like how we are as people that we need to embrace and hold each other up and hold each other together in all the ways that we can. I don't love the public school system. I will, maybe I don't want to say that on this recording, but there are, there's problems with um, there's problems with the way that education is controlled. There's problems with the way that education is voted on, how, who's going to talk about what. There's a lot of trust. I personally build relationships to the best of my abilities with every teacher that my kids have. I meet them, I bug them. I'm that mom. I talk to them at the end of the day. Part of the reason why I do the volunteer work at the school that I do is so I can know what's going on. I can know who I'm talking to so that I can kind of get an idea of what's happening in that classroom, so that I know the other conversations that I might need to have with my kids at home. I'm very invested in their education. And the idea of freedom of expression, I love it because I'm so awkward because it's my job. It is my job to defend people's right to make radio on Trent Radio that I might not like. And that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow. I have not been put in a position yet where I have felt something was broadcast that was hateful or dangerous. Sometimes I just really didn't like people's perspectives. And then I was very happy that they publicly had their name, because everybody is producer oriented. No one's allowed to be anonymous. Their name and their email address and their information is up on our website, so you know who's talking about what, right? And I do feel that at a time in the world where we talk about, freedom of speech in the States and freedom of expression here in Canada, for me, it's very easy to see where the line is drawn. As soon as someone's opinion infringes on the right of someone else to have an opinion, I feel that that's the line. I feel that that is very clearly not being a supportive human being and recognizing that all human beings are equal, but I do recognize that there are certain choices in life. Like I recognize a topic like abortion, is a very tricky and personal question, and I entirely respect every decision. Every person's idea. And that's actually a conversation that I've had with my kids, because I have heard things slip out sometimes. I'm like, whoa, wait, whoever said that to you? And then we've had to have a big conversation, and they're like, oh gosh, mom's gonna talk now, right? But I think about, being able to have an opinion and a perspective is very important, and recognizing that that's about yourself. I get to make choices for me, and I'm the only person who I get to make choices for. And as a mom, hopefully I can empower my kids with enough information to make choices for themselves, and to recognize that their choices must not infringe upon the rights of others, right? And that when they make a choice, it's for themselves and to themselves. And in sharing on the radio, I would not be able to stay with my job if I was actively put in a position where I felt that something on the radio might be defensible within the freedom of expression rights that harmed our community in a significant way. I don't think that I would be able to continue my job in that way. And I think that as a community, we would look at changing the way possibly that we do things. But it's a very tricky line. It seems so easy, you know, when you're talking about it in a group of like-minded individuals who really respect human beings. It seems like a very easy conversation to have. But when you have that conversation with someone who sits on the other side of the line, who is not having a conversation, but is defending a viewpoint with tactics and words and jargon, that's where, for me, I feel like media, social media specifically, goes off the rails. I know those don't answer. I mean, I can't answer those questions. I can only tell you how I feel about them, right? Yeah.
Does anybody else want to ask a question?
I wanted to ask, actually. I wanted to say, first of all, that I love how you have shifted my personal perspective on music and the way that it's, even just in this talk, like Mel said, you blew me away there with the self-care of singing. Like, I hadn't actually thought of that, and I appreciate that. So thank you. And I just wanted to say too, and ask if you felt a shift. And then as I was thinking of asking that question, I thought, the question is, have you felt a shift in people reacting? Like, do you feel like people are more open to talk about things as, Me Too and all these, Time's Up, all these movements have happened so that there's more conversation? Do you feel like that's a shift that's happened while you've been making these conversations more accessible? Or do you feel like maybe also that the people that are coming to the table to talk are like-minded people? Like,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do feel like as a community, or at least the community that I get to engage with, I feel that over the past few years there has been a lot of intentional work to learn how to shut your mouth when it's not your turn to talk, and how to find ways to create opportunities for marginalized voices to be amplified. I do think that is something that I see and hear. Learning about different things, and not just from the same teacher every day, but from a wider range of people. We're doing a project right now at Trent Radio that the type of radio we make, we call it producer oriented, which means that Trent Radio doesn't make radio, you do, and my job is to help you figure out how to get on the radio, right? And my job's not to care if anyone's listening. My job's not even to like your show. My job is to help you raise your voice on the radio. And when we look at the communities that we are hoping to serve in Peterborough, it's for us, we generally focus on our analog broadcast range. And so we do the work to figure out who's not, like whose voices aren't being heard there. So we're doing this project right now called Producer Oriented. And it is about creating and delivering focused workshops and production series. There's one that's happening in Curve Lake First Nation. Missy Knott is doing the work as our community liaison to create a whole series of content. Rather than us trying to figure out how can we make radio that's relevant, it's like teach people to make radio that's relevant to themselves. We're working with the New Canadian Centre to figure out how do we get New Canadian voices on the radio. How do we share the skills in an accessible way? How do we get the resources? How do we come together to create a space so that people understand that we want their voices on the radio, that this space is open to everybody. And we're going to continue to do work focused on youth, finding ways specifically to empower youth in the classroom to use the radio, use that old analog radio, kind of find ways to communicate. I think of it as slow media, instead of the like quick text messages or, comments where everything's happening so quickly. You spend so much time making this radio show, and then you wait for it to broadcast, and you tell everyone to listen. Everyone listens at the same time. And then the responses come in slowly, right? And it's just trying to slow down the way that we communicate. And also there's something really intentional about making radio, that when you get a kid to do it, that all of a sudden they are going to put that much more focus and that much more I guess dedication, there's work into because they're, this is going to be for everybody to see. You make a social media post, you don't really think about it. But if you make a radio show that's going to go on, the airwaves, they're public property in Canada, this really cool thing. You're going to also, I think this idea of being seen and heard and feeling accountable, it's like if you take the time to focus on kids, for me, which I think is really, really important, then they're going to want to invest, right? They're going to feel like they count rather than trying to get attention. If you let them know that you see them, like we live in a small, I'm sorry, I like totally segue all over the place here. We live in a small community. I live on Murray Street in downtown Peterborough. Like the kids who go to our school are in our neighborhood, and they all know me as Sister Jill. Actually, I go into music, the kindergartner kids, I'll be swimming at the Y and I have a little face going, hey, Sister Jill, but I make a point of making eye contact and waving and saying good morning to every community member from that school, to every kid who lives on my block, because I want them to know that I see them. I want them to know that they're here and that they're being noticed. For one, so that they're not going to like egg my house at Christmas or Christmas, Halloween, so that like they recognize that people are watching them. But also, like when you say good morning to someone, when you take the time to invite someone to do something, when you acknowledge them specifically, like they stand up straighter, right? So it's like finding these people in our community to be like, come and make radio and do this thing in your voice. Like we want to hear it. People are like, oh, like my voice is important in Peterborough. My voice is important. And then taking the time to, even like you've invited me here today, I get to ramble about lots of things, tell lots of different people lots of things, encourage their voices. But I had to sit down and think about like what's important to me, right? How do I want the world to see me? And it gives me confidence. It makes me feel valued as a member of this community. It makes me feel important. It makes me feel special. And that's something that's going to, encourage and influence the work that I do, even for the next, few days or month or whatever. It's going to affect the way that I can impart those, ideas on my kids. Like all day, I've been like, I'm so nervous about this. And they're like, you're fine, Mom. You got this. You're going to, you talk all the time. Right. And so being able to share all those parts, like you've given me this gift. And I think this is the gift that we can give to other people. That was really long. I'm not going to apologize, but I feel like I want to.
No, I love it. It's so good. That's so great. I think I was wondering, like, I know that, our emails are out there for the people who have a show to get comments that come in, and mostly, on our show, we get only good things. And I wonder if it's changed over the time that you've been at Trent Radio, whether people are more accepting of all the different voices that come in, or if you still get if you get any of the kind of harsh responses, because
yeah, and it's great. I mean, we have people complain, especially, back in the spring when everybody was listening to the radio because they were trying to figure out how to fill their time. We became much more aware of, maybe some of the more controversial topics or content or songs or language, things that we had broadcasting that no one was really paying attention to before. But I do think that, I mean, people have opinions, and it's so great when someone complains, because I'm like that's amazing that you're offended, or that's amazing that you're, and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that person, that was a bad idea, we're gonna have a talk, something like that. But mostly it's like, what's the problem, how does it harm you? Like, did you turn off the radio? Because no one's forcing you to listen to the radio. Like, you have so many other options right now. If you don't like something, it's like when you go to a restaurant, you're not going to order the menu item that you don't like. But most importantly, they're invited to have their own radio show. It's like, if you like strongly disagree with this show, I want you to have a radio show because it means you're passionate. It means you have your own ideas. And I want you to think about accountably and respectfully how you can share those ideas, right? And usually they don't. Most people just want to complain. But I don't really know what the difference is or if it's changed much. I think there will always be people who don't like being uncomfortable. And I think there are also people who don't like being called out, because there's definitely some programming on Trent Radio that calls us all in to do better and to think about our relationships and how problematic they really are in some circles.
Right.
I was just thinking about when you were talking about radio being a slow form in comparison to instantaneous stuff, but I was thinking about the fact that even pre-COVID, podcasts and radio, I'll put them both together because to me, I do both. I listen to the radio nonstop and I listen to podcasts. They are longer form, and it's weird and kind of contradictory that, and young people too, have the patience and resolve to listen to some long form stuff, even though we keep saying that we live in a culture where everything is fast and students and young people will only do 5-minute bursts. But actually, my students in my classes all tell me about the podcasts they listen to. They say podcasts more than radio, to be fair, but some also listen to the radio. But a lot of those programs are very long form and meandering, and there's some, pretty heavy investment of time if you want to listen to some podcasts. They are not quick and easy. And I wonder about that contradiction, that we think people want everything fast and bite-sized, and yet we do have a growing popularity of long form ear only.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, and some of those podcasts I've learned, because I've had the privilege of teaching a radio podcast workshop at Trent for the past couple of years, and I've noticed that when students talk about podcasts, they often use the term watching podcasts.
Oh.
They're watching them on YouTube, right? They're doing this other thing. There are many people who totally engage, very like lots of hours every week in these podcasts, and it is audio only. But there are also people who are watching. It is their television. Like how many students have cable these days, right? Lots of people don't have TVs with them. This is their media that they are consuming instead of watching primetime television. I think you're not wrong. Like people are investing time in these resources, but also podcasts are on demand. They're when you want them. You can rewind them. You can skip ahead. You have banks of them that you can access when you want to. In radio, you have to anticipate, right? Like these talks that you're doing now, this is the radio form. This is happening in real time. And the cool thing about radio is that once it's gone, it's gone. Like you can't get it. Our programmers can choose to do podcasts if they want to, but once they're gone, they're gone. It's like you had to be there kind of thing. And then there's that other moment of like, I want to get to this thing. I want to have it on my time. Of podcasting, there's different restrictions, there's different access, and I think that they both hold such a significantly valuable place in the way that media is created and shared, and meets a lot of different accessibility needs. But radio, this thing that happens, when Steph goes into the studio in real time, if someone wants to tell her what they thought of the show, they have to wait. Or if someone wants to figure out what the follow-up is, they have to wait till next week. Like there's that type of thing that's going on. You have to wait for the moment of it, I think.
Yeah, that's different for us, is that we had phone calls coming in for our show where we had people calling and saying, I don't like it when you play the Yodel King, like things like that. And we'd be like, okay, well, thanks for letting us know. We still like it, but thanks. Yeah. But we only get nice things now. So I've just wondered about that.
Yeah, but it's true that it's funny. I was just thinking about how, criticism is not always bad, and you can just sort of say, yeah, you could make your own radio program if you want. I kind of like that. But I also think we're just so ultra sensitive to criticism too, that we can't, sometimes it's okay to say, well, That's fine for us to disagree. I enjoy yodeling, you don't. So I'm gonna keep up with that, and because it's my show. I like it. But you often take those things to heart in a way that we don't take compliments as deeply as we take criticism, right? We often take criticism much more deeply, and deeply, like for days, where sometimes someone gives you a compliment, you're like, oh, that's nice, and you move on.
And I think this goes back to that Jan Arden thing, right? Where it's like learning how to like hear other people's opinions of you, but not let them infiltrate your core.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is something that, I mean, age does help you attain, 100%, because you're like, oh, this is the best version of me. Or maybe, if you have children, you look at them and you're like, oh, you're just like me. That's something I actually don't have control over, something that I've been trying to deal with my whole life, or, whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think age, I'm not suggesting age doesn't bring some wisdom. I just think sometimes we don't give younger folks enough credit for having some innate wisdom. I was thinking about your work with kids and thinking, you know what, kids have a lot of innate wisdom, and just because they haven't had as many years in, there are times as a parent, of course, where I do step in and just say, because I'm almost 50, and that's why I'm able to tell you this, because actually I have some years under my belt that you don't, sweetie. So anyway, I think, Steph, did you want to add any last comments before we wrap up?
I feel like it's been such a great talk already that I can't, I'm soaking it all up. I'm really grateful for the talk today with you, Jill. Thanks so much for coming to talk with us. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to add? Any questions or anything?
Thank you so much for coming in and teaching us about a lot of different aspects of radio and communication and community. It was great.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a joy to be able to share. Again, this is just my opinions and my experiences. And it's nice to have like a sounding board to say these things and watch your faces. Be like, what did you think of that? Because this is how we get to shape our community together.
Well, thank you. And it does actually feel like you pretty much encapsulated there the reason we do it and the reason we call it Enwayaang, the way we speak together. It's the name of the building that Gzowski College is housed in. We live it, we mean it, we breathe it, and you exemplified that perfectly in a lovely way, and your own experiences and thoughts were beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Jill, thank you for being our guest, and we will, good. So you can always catch the recording now that, see, we're going to have, it'll be on our Gzowski College.
I will be looking at that for sure. Thanks,
Great.
Jill.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.